The camp was quiet except for the soft hum of alien lights. Daniel sat alone at a metal table, cleaning the black rifle in his hands. The air smelled of smoke from the earlier battle, mixed with the strange scent of alien plants growing outside. The camp walls, he had been stationed here for only 2 weeks, and already he felt like an outsider. Humans were rare in this sector, and his new allies, the Viren, didn't trust easily. The tent flap moved, and someone stepped in. Daniel looked up and saw her. She was small, barely reaching his chest, but her armor was light and sharp-edged. Shining like silver under the lamp, her eyes were bright, glowing faintly in the dim light, and they locked on him with the focus of a hunter. She walked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous she was. "You're the human soldier," she said, her voice smooth but edged with amusement. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's me." She tilted her head, her gaze scanning him from head to toe. Then, without warning, she let out a short laugh. "For a human, you are." "Smaller than I expected." Daniel frowned, but kept his voice calm. "Smaller doesn't mean weaker." The tiny alien warrior smirked, as if she had heard that line 100 times before. "My name is Kira," she said, stepping closer. Her armor made no sound. Her movements were almost too quiet. "You and I will be working together. Sometimes," she added, like it was a joke, only she understood. Daniel returned to cleaning his rifle, but her presence made it hard to focus. Kira moved around the table slowly, like she was studying him from every angle. "Tell me, human, are you fast?" she asked suddenly. "Fast enough?" Daniel said. She chuckled again. "We will see. Outside." The camp's loudspeakers called out orders in both human and alien languages. Soldiers moved quickly through the corridors of tents and equipment. Piles. But inside this tent, time felt slower. Kira's eyes were sharp, like she was trying to peel away his calm face and see the man underneath. She leaned on the table, her chin just barely above the edge, and smirked. "You might not survive long here, human," she whispered, almost like a warning, almost like a tease. Daniel wasn't sure if she was testing him or just enjoying herself. Either way, he decided not to rise to the bait. "You'll see I can handle myself," he said simply. Kira's smirk widened. "I hope so, or I'll have to carry you." The thought of being carried by someone so small made Daniel's jaw tighten. But he stayed silent. That evening, as the sun dipped below the alien mountains, the sky turned a strange, deep red. Daniel was given his first assignment: guard duty. Not just any guard duty, but guarding Kira's tent. He didn't ask why, he just followed orders. The alien night air was colder than he expected, and the wind carried sounds from far away howls, cracks, and distant thunder. Kira stepped out once during his watch, her silver armor catching the starlight. She looked at him briefly, her expression unreadable. "You're still here," she said, as if she had expected him to give up and walk away. Daniel shrugged. Orders are orders. Kira's eyes lingered on him for a moment before she disappeared back into the tent. Hours passed, the cold biting at his fingers. Then the alarm sounded 3 short bursts, followed by a long one. Enemy. Scouts had been spotted near the outer fence. Daniel gripped his rifle, scanning the shadows beyond the camp lights. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sudden rush of knowing the quiet was over. Kira emerged again, this time with 2 curved alien blades strapped to her back. She glanced at him and said, "Stay close," before Daniel could reply. She vanished into the darkness ahead. He followed, surprised at how silently she moved. The ground was rough, littered with sharp alien stones. But she never stumbled. They reached the outer fence, where a faint movement caught Daniel's eye. Something was out there, something watching. Kira crouched low, her eyes narrowing. Her hand rested on her weapon, but she didn't draw yet. She seemed to be listening, feeling the air, sensing something Daniel couldn't. Then, with a sudden motion, she pointed to a shadow moving near the ridge. "Scout," she whispered. Daniel aimed his rifle, but before he could fire, the shadow slipped away into the rocks. Kira stood and turned to him. "To slow, human," she said. That smirk returning to her face, but this time there was something else in her voice, not just teasing, but a challenge. Daniel felt the fire of competition spark in his chest. He wasn't about to let this tiny alien warrior see him as weak. She started walking back toward the camp, her silver armor glinting in the starlight. Daniel followed, already thinking of how he would prove her wrong. Neither of them knew that tonight was just the first step into something far more dangerous and far more personal. The next morning came with a pale blue light spilling across the alien camp. Daniel woke early, the cold air biting his skin as he stepped outside. He could hear the sound of metal clashing. Training had already started in the main yard. Viren warriors moved fast, their small frames darting between obstacles with deadly precision. Daniel adjusted his jacket and headed toward the noise. He spotted Kira almost immediately. She stood in the center of a sparring ring, facing a much larger alien soldier. Her movements were a blur, fast, sharp, and impossible to predict. Within seconds, she had disarmed her opponent and knocked him flat on his back. The other Viren warriors laughed and clapped, their voices echoing through the yard. Then Kira's eyes found him. That smirk returned instantly. "Well, if it isn't the small human," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Daniel clenched his jaw, feeling the eyes of the crowd on him. Kira waved him forward. "Come, human, let's see if you can keep up." Daniel stepped into the ring, his rifle left at the edge. She tossed him a wooden practice staff, her small hands moving with easy grace. "No excuses," she said, tilting her head. "I want to see what you've got." They circled each other slowly, her eyes sharp, his grip tight on the staff. Then, without warning, she lunged. The first strike came fast, forcing him to block with both hands. Strength surprised him. The impact rattled his arms. He tried to push back, but she spun low, sweeping at his legs. Daniel jumped over the strike, barely keeping his balance. "You're quick," he said, breathing hard. She smirked. "For your size, maybe." The teasing was constant, every move followed by a comment. When he missed a swing, she whispered, "Too slow." When he blocked her attack, she said, "Not bad for a human." It was infuriating, but it kept him focused. He realized she wasn't just trying to beat him, she was testing him. By the end of the match, Daniel was drenched in sweat. Kira tapped her staff against the ground and smiled. "You didn't fall," she said. "That's something." Her words sounded like a compliment, but her tone carried the same playful challenge. Daniel stepped out of the ring, determined to prove himself the next time. Later that day, they were both assigned to move heavy alien supply crates. Daniel gripped one of the massive containers, muscles straining as he lifted. Kira walked past, carrying a crate just as large. With ease. "Maybe I should carry yours too," she said with a sly smile. He ignored her words, focusing on getting his crate to the storage tent. But her presence followed him all day. Every task, every movement, she was there with a comment or a glance. In the mess hall, she sat across from him, leaning forward. "Do humans always eat so slowly?" she asked, watching him chew. Daniel set his fork down. "Maybe we enjoy our food," she laughed. Or maybe you just can't keep up, despite the teasing." Daniel began to notice other things when they passed through the shooting range. She hit every target without missing once. When a group of younger warriors struggled with a damaged drone, she fixed it in minutes. Her skills were undeniable, and though her words were sharp, her eyes sometimes softened when she thought no one was watching. That evening, the camp commander called for a mission briefing. An enemy convoy had been spotted moving through a narrow canyon. They needed a two-person team to slip in, sabotage the supplies, and get out before detection. Daniel was surprised when the commander looked directly at him and Kira. "You two report to the south gate in 1 hour," the commander said as they left the briefing. Kira glanced at him with that same smirk. "Looks like you're stuck with me," she said. Daniel replied, "Just try to keep up." Her laugh was short and sharp. "We'll see." They spent the next hour preparing their gear. Kira strapped 2 curved blades to her back, while Daniel checked the magazine on his rifle when they met at the gate. The sky was already turning dark. The air felt heavy, the wind carrying the scent of dust and stone. Without another word, they set off toward the canyon. As they moved, Kira stayed a few steps ahead. She was silent, her feet barely making a sound. On the rocky path, Daniel followed, watching how she scanned the shadows, how her body moved like she was part of the landscape. She was small, but there was nothing fragile about her. Every motion was controlled, every step deliberate. Halfway to the canyon, she slowed and whispered, "Patrol ahead." Daniel spotted the faint glow of enemy sensors in the distance. Kira signaled for him to wait, then slipped forward into the dark. A few moments later, the glow vanished, and she returned. "They didn't even see me," she said with a quiet grin. They reached a ridge overlooking the convoy. Daniel crouched beside her, peering down at the line of enemy vehicles. She handed him a small alien device. "Plant this on the lead transport." He nodded, and together they slid down the rocks toward their target. The air was tense, every sound magnified in the silence. For the first time, Daniel felt something different in her presence. The teasing was gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a warrior, and though she still moved like the wind, he could tell she trusted him to watch her back. This was no longer just about proving himself. It was about surviving the night together. The canyon stretched before them like the open mouth of some ancient beast. The walls rose high on both sides, jagged and dark, casting long shadows in the fading light. Daniel and Kira crouched behind a cluster of sharp rocks, the cold wind cutting against their faces. Below, the enemy convoy moved slowly through the narrow path, engines humming. The glow of red lights from their machines made the canyon look like it was bleeding. Daniel adjusted his rifle, checking the scope one last time. Kira crouched beside him, her small frame steady as stone. Her eyes followed every movement of the convoy with intense focus. "We take the lead transport first," she whispered. Then moved to the supply hauler. Her voice was calm, but Daniel could hear the steel behind it. They slid down the rocks, moving from shadow to shadow. Daniel's boots crunched against loose gravel, but Kira's feet made no sound. She was like a shadow herself, slipping between boulders and blending into the canyon walls, he realized. Then that, without her speed and precision, this mission would already be over. But he also knew she wouldn't make it without his covering fire if things went wrong. When they reached the convoy's edge, Kira signaled for him to wait. She moved forward alone, climbing onto the side of the lead transport with quiet ease. Her small hands worked quickly, planting the alien device they had prepared. Daniel's eyes scanned the ridge above them. He caught a flicker of movement. "Scout," he muttered under his breath, before he could raise his rifle. A sharp whine cut the air. A sniper shot. The energy beam hissed past his head, burning a black streak into the stone behind him. "Kira, move!" Daniel shouted. She leaped from the transport just as the sniper fired again. The shot grazing her shoulder plate, she rolled into cover beside him, her breathing quick but steady. "Sniper on the ridge," Daniel said, his voice low but urgent. Kira nodded once, her hand going to one of the curved blades on her back. "I'll take him," she said, already moving before he could argue. Daniel laid down, suppressing fire, his shots sparking against the ridge and forcing the sniper to duck. Kira sprinted up the side path, her small figure almost vanishing into the darkness. The enemy convoy began to stir, soldiers shouting in a language Daniel didn't understand. One of the transports began to turn its turret toward their position. Daniel shifted his aim and fired 3 quick shots. Disabling the gun before it could lock on, he kept firing, his rifle kicking against his shoulder out of the corner of his eye. He saw Kira leap from the ridge onto the sniper, a flash of silver. A short struggle and then silence. When she returned, her breathing was heavier. But her smirk was back. "Sniper won't bother us," she said simply. They didn't waste time. Kira triggered the device on the lead transport. A burst of blue light flared, and the vehicle's systems shut down instantly. Panic rippled through the convoy as engines stalled and weapons powered down. Daniel and Kira moved fast, planting a second device on the supply hauler. This one wouldn't just disable it, would destroy. They ducked behind a rock as the blast went off, a thunderous boom, shaking the canyon walls. Flames lit up the night. Casting wild shadows across the stone, the enemy shouted in confusion, firing blindly into the darkness. "Kira, time to go." Daniel called. She nodded, darting ahead as they sprinted toward the escape route. The ground was uneven, littered with sharp rocks and loose gravel. Daniel's heavier steps echoed in the canyon, while Kira's were as light as whispers. But no matter how fast she was, she stayed just close enough for him to follow halfway out. They heard the deep mechanical roar of enemy drones taking flight. Shadows passed over them as 2 large hunter drones swept down, their searchlights sweeping the ground. Kira grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. They pressed against the cold stone as the lights passed overhead. Daniel could feel her heartbeat against his arm, fast but steady. When the drones moved on, they slipped back into the open and ran. Blaster fire lit up the air behind them. Burning hot trails passed their heads. Daniel turned, firing a few covering shots. Taking one drone down in a spray of sparks, Kira took out the second with a thrown blade, the weapon slicing through its engine with deadly precision. It crashed into the canyon floor in a burst of smoke. By the time they reached the ridge above the canyon, both of them were breathing hard. The glow from the burning convoy lit the rocks around them in red and gold. Kira glanced at him, her smirk softer now. "You didn't slow me down," she said, almost like a real compliment. Daniel gave a small grin. "And you didn't get yourself killed." They made their way back to camp under the alien stars. The mission was a success. But Daniel knew something had shifted between them. The teasing hadn't stopped, but now there was respect under it. Still, he could see in her eyes that the challenge wasn't over. If anything, it had only just begun. The next day, the alien sun rose slowly, its pale light spilling across the camp like a warning. Daniel's body ached from the mission. But there was no time to rest. Orders came in early. Enemy forces had planted explosives along the canyon walls. If they detonated, the main supply route would be destroyed, cutting off food and weapons for weeks. Daniel and Kira were assigned to lead a small scout unit to disarm them. From the start, Daniel could feel the tension in the air. The unit was made of both human and Viren soldiers, and trust was still fragile. Some Viren glanced at Daniel with doubt, while others looked at Kira with complete confidence. Kira didn't help matters. Her smirk returned whenever she caught Daniel's eye. But there was no teasing in her voice when she said, "We move together. No one splits off." They reached the mouth of the canyon by mid-morning. The wind whistled through the high walls, carrying dust and the faint metallic smell of explosives. Kira signaled for silence, her small frame moving ahead like a shadow. Daniel followed close, his rifle ready, his eyes scanning every crack in the rock. The rest of the unit spread out in a staggered line, covering both flanks. Halfway in, Kira stopped suddenly, raising her hand. Daniel froze, then saw it. A thin wire stretched across the path, almost invisible against the stone. The wire led to a cluster of alien charges hidden in a crevice. Kira crouched down, studying them, her fingers tracing the unfamiliar shapes. "This isn't fire and tech," she murmured. "It's theirs." Daniel knelt beside her, his larger hands working carefully to hold the wires steady. Kira worked fast, her tools clicking softly in the silence. The rest of the unit kept watch, the air thick with tension. A single wrong move would end it all in a flash. Finally, with a sharp twist, Kira pulled the detonator free, and the charge powered down. They disarmed 3 more explosives without incident, but when they reached the 4th, the canyon floor trembled beneath their feet. A deep rumble echoed from above, and rocks began to fall. Ambush. Someone shouted. From the ridges, enemy soldiers appeared, their rifles flashing in the dusty air. The unit scattered for cover, blaster fire cutting through the narrow path. Daniel fired back, picking off 2 enemies before rolling behind a large boulder. Kira dove beside him, her breathing quick, her eyes scanning for an opening. "We can't stay pinned here," she said. "Then we move," Daniel replied. They pushed forward together, Kira darting out to draw fire while Daniel covered her with precise shots. They moved like they had trained for years, though they had only known each other for days. She was fast, slipping between cover, and he was steady, holding the line with his rifle. Bit by bit, they forced the attackers back toward the ridge. When one enemy tried to flank them, Kira met him head-on, her blade flashing in the dusty light. But just as the last of the attackers fell, the rumble in the canyon grew louder. The explosives they hadn't reached yet had been triggered. Kira's eyes widened. "We're out of time, run." They sprinted down the path, the sound of collapsing rock chasing them. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see. A massive boulder crashed into the path behind them, sealing off the way back. They had no choice but to keep moving forward. Deeper into the canyon, the rest of their unit was cut off, their shouts fading in the distance. Daniel and Kira found themselves alone. The path twisted into a narrow tunnel, the walls pressing close inside. The air was damp and cold. The light dim, water dripped from the ceiling, echoing in the silence. "This isn't on the maps," Daniel said, "which means they don't know we're here," Kira replied, her voice steady. But he could hear the tension under her calm tone. They moved carefully. The tunnel floor slippery with moss and loose stones. Strange claw marks scored the walls, long and deep. Daniel glanced at them uneasily. "Please tell me that's old." Kira shook her head. "Stay alert." A distant growl rolled through the darkness, low and heavy. They followed the sound until it was just ahead, in the faint glow of Kira's wrist light. Something shifted in the shadows. A creature stepped forward, its body low to the ground, its eyes glowing faint orange. Its claws scraped against the stone, sending sparks into the air. Daniel raised his rifle, but Kira grabbed his arm. "Don't shoot yet," she whispered. "It might not attack if we don't threaten it." The creature sniffed the air, its head tilting as if studying them for a tense moment. None of them moved then. Without warning, it lunged. Daniel fired, the shot echoing like thunder in the tunnel. The creature's roar shook the walls. But Kira was already moving. She slid under its swing. Slashing at its legs, Daniel kept firing, each shot hitting center mass until the beast finally collapsed. The tunnel fell silent except for their breathing. Kira leaned on her blade, catching her breath. "That was big," Daniel said, his voice low. She smirked. "And you didn't freeze. Good." They shared a quick glance, something unspoken passing between them. They both knew now they could trust each other when it mattered. But they also knew the way forward was still uncertain as they continued through the tunnel. Daniel realized something had changed. Kira's teasing had faded for the moment, replaced by a quiet respect. And though they were alone in unknown territory, he didn't feel like he was walking with an enemy anymore. He was walking with a partner. Asterisk, the tunnel opened into a hidden cavern. The air inside was warmer, carrying the faint scent of earth and smoke. Soft light flickered against the walls. Coming from glowing crystals embedded in the rock, Daniel stepped in first, rifle ready. Scanning the space for danger, Kira followed close behind, her eyes taking in the strange beauty of the place. In the center of the cavern was a small pool of clear water. Steam curled from its surface, hinting that it was naturally heated. Beside it lay old camp remains, burned wood, broken tools, and scraps of cloth. "Someone's been here before," Daniel said quietly. Kira crouched, touching one of the charred sticks. Not recently. They were both tired, their muscles aching from hours of running and fighting. Kira moved toward a flat section of rock, setting down her gear with a slow sigh. Daniel knelt at the pool, splashing water on his face. It was warm and soothing, easing the tension in his shoulders. "You should rest," he said, glancing at her. Kira looked at him for a moment, her smirk absent for once. "You too, human," she replied softly. She sat cross-legged, removing the light armor that covered her arms. Underneath, Daniel noticed faint scars, thin lines. Some fresh, some old. They told a story of battles she'd fought long before. They met. He sat beside the pool, cleaning the dust from his rifle. The cavern was quiet, except for the sound of dripping water and the soft hum from the crystals. For the first time since they met, neither of them felt the need to fill the silence with words. It wasn't an awkward silence, it was something calmer, almost peaceful, still. Daniel could feel her eyes on him now and then. After a while, Kira spoke, her voice low. "I teased you because I wanted to see if you'd break." Daniel turned to her, eyebrows raised. "You were testing me," he said, more a statement than a question. She nodded. "Most humans I've met. They don't last long out here." Daniel gave a small smile. "I guess I'm not most humans." Kira's lips curved slightly. "No, you're not." She picked up one of her blades, running a cloth along its edge. "I fight better when I know the person beside me won't run away," she said quietly. Her tone carried no mockery this time, only honesty. The warmth from the pool made the cavern feel safe, but they both knew the safety was temporary. Outside, enemies were still searching, and if they found the tunnel entrance, the fight would come to them. For now, though, the cavern was their small refuge. Daniel took off his gloves, rubbing warmth back into his fingers. Kira shifted closer to the pool, dipping her hands in the water. The glow from the crystals reflected in her eyes, making them shine like molten gold. "You really don't give up, do you?" she asked, almost like she was talking to herself. He shook his head. "It's not in my nature." A faint rumble echoed from somewhere deeper in the tunnels. Daniel looked up sharply, but the sound faded as quickly as it came. Kira listened for a long moment before relaxing again. "We'll take turns keeping watch," she said. Daniel agreed. But for now, exhaustion made it hard to think about anything else. They shared the dried rations from Daniel's pack. It wasn't much, but the simple act of eating together felt different tonight. There was no teasing, no competition, just quiet understanding. Kira leaned back against the rock, closing her eyes for a moment. The tension in her posture slowly eased. When it was Daniel's turn to rest, he lay near the pool. The warmth from the water and the soft light from the crystals made the cavern feel far from the war outside. He glanced over at Kira, who now sat with her blade across her lap. Her gaze was fixed on the tunnel entrance, alert but calm. For a moment, he saw not just a warrior, but someone carrying a weight she never spoke about. As the hours passed, the cold from outside never reached them. When Daniel woke for his watch, Kira was still awake, her head tilted toward the faint light. She looked at him and said quietly, "You remind me of someone I knew." He didn't ask who. It felt like one of those things she wasn't ready to share. Instead, he just said, "I hope that's a good thing." Kira's lips curved faintly. "It is, The rest of the night passed in companionable silence. They didn't need to talk to understand each other anymore. Somewhere between the fights, the teasing, and the missions, something had shifted, something neither of them could ignore. When the first pale light of dawn touched the crystals, Kira stood, fastening her armor again. Daniel rose too, checking his rifle. They didn't speak, but their eyes met, and in that look, there was a promise they would face whatever came next, together. The morning air in the cavern felt heavier than the night before. Daniel packed the last of his gear, while Kira tightened the straps on her armor. Neither spoke much, but both could feel that something was waiting for them outside. The mission was no longer just about getting back to camp. It was about surviving whatever the enemy had left in their path. They stepped out of the tunnel into the open canyon. The alien sun was low, casting long shadows across the jagged rocks. For a brief moment, Daniel thought the way forward was clear, but then he saw deep claw marks carved into the ground ahead. Kira noticed them too, her eyes narrowing. "These aren't from the creature we fought last night," she said quietly. Daniel scanned the ridges above, his rifle ready. The silence was too perfect, too still. Even the wind seemed to have stopped moving. That was when the sound came slow. Heavy footsteps echoing between the canyon walls. From the shadows ahead, a massive alien beast emerged. It was twice the height of a man, with thick black scales and glowing red eyes. Its claws dug into the rock with each step, leaving deep grooves. Kira drew both her blades, her stance low and ready. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle, aiming at the creature's chest. The beast let out a deep roar that rattled the stones under their feet. It charged forward with terrifying speed for something so large. Daniel fired a burst of shots, the impact sparking against its armored hide. Kira darted to the side, her blades flashing as she struck at its legs. The creature swung a massive claw at her, forcing her to roll away just in time. Armor's too thick. Daniel called. Kira shouted back, "Aim for the joints." Daniel shifted his aim, targeting the soft gaps between the beast's plates. Each shot slowed it slightly, but it kept coming. Kira moved like lightning, slashing at its side and drawing its attention away from him. The fight turned into a deadly dance. Daniel laid down covering fire, while Kira struck from the blind spots. But the beast was learning, began swiping wider, forcing both of them to move faster. A sudden swing caught Daniel's arm, sending pain shooting through him. He stumbled back, nearly dropping his rifle. Kira rushed in, leaping onto the creature's back. Her blades pierced the thick hide at the base of its neck. The beast roared, twisting violently to throw her off. Daniel used the distraction to fire a full burst into the exposed wound. The creature staggered, its roar turning into a pained snarl. But it wasn't finished. With a final desperate lunge, it slammed its body into the canyon wall. The impact knocked Kira to the ground, her blades clattering away. Daniel didn't think. He ran forward, putting himself between her and the beast. He fired until the rifle clicked empty, the beast collapsing in a heap before them. For a moment, neither moved. The air was thick with dust and the sharp smell of burnt flesh. Daniel turned to Kira, who was catching her breath on one knee. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. She nodded. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did," Daniel replied. There was no teasing in her eyes, now only something deeper, something almost vulnerable. She stood, retrieving her blades, and they both stepped around the beast's body. The path ahead was open again. But they knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. They started walking, their footsteps echoing softly in the canyon as they moved. Daniel realized how naturally they worked together now. She didn't have to tell him what to do, he just knew, and when she moved ahead, he was already covering her back. The constant teasing from before had been replaced by unspoken trust. Even in silence, they understood each other. By midday, they reached a narrow pass that would take them back to ward camp. But just as they entered, a voice echoed from the rocks above. Enemy soldiers stepped into view, rifles aimed, blocking both ends of the pass. They were trapped. Kira's eyes met Daniel's. No words, just a quick plan forming between them. Daniel dropped low. Firing at the soldiers on the ridge, Kira sprinted toward the ones blocking the exit. Weaving between shots, she was too fast for them to hit, and her blades found their marks with precision. Daniel's shots forced the others to take cover, giving her time to finish her fight. Within minutes, the pass was clear, bodies lying still on the ground. They didn't stop moving until the canyon opened into the familiar valley near camp. The sight of the distant towers and walls brought a rare smile to Kira's face. "We made it," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. Daniel gave a small nod. "Yeah, we did." And for the first time, the victory didn't feel like his or hers, felt like theirs. As they approached the camp gates, the guards stared in surprise. Two warriors walking side by side, covered in dust and scars. No one missed the way Kira stayed close to him now. That night, there would be no mocking challenge. There would only be the quiet understanding of two people who had fought, bled, and survived together. The gates of the camp opened slowly. Daniel and Kira stepped inside, their boots dragging slightly from exhaustion. Dust clung to their armor, and faint cuts marked their skin. The other soldiers paused in their work, eyes following them as they walked past. Whispers spread quickly. Everyone had heard they were trapped in the canyon. Daniel ignored the stares, but Kira seemed to notice everyone. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced by a calm, unreadable expression. The commander stepped forward, his gaze moving between them. "You both made it back," he said. A hint of surprise in his voice. Kira gave a simple nod. "Mission complete." The commander's eyes flickered to Daniel. "Not bad for a human," he said, almost reluctantly. Daniel didn't rise to the bait, only replying, "We work better together than apart." Kira's lips twitched slightly, as if she was fighting back a smile. The commander gave a short nod and dismissed them. They walked side by side through the camp. For once, Kira didn't rush ahead or leave him behind. Instead, she matched his pace, her shoulder brushing his lightly every now and then. They passed the training yard where new recruits were sparring. Kira's eyes lingered there for a moment, perhaps remembering the day she first challenged him. When they reached the quiet row of tents at the far end, Daniel slowed. "This is me," he said. Stopping outside his own tent, Kira hesitated, her eyes meeting his for a long moment. "Come by my tent tonight," she said softly. "We need to talk." Before he could answer, she turned and walked away. That evening, the camp settled into its usual rhythm, voices low, fires burning. In metal barrels, Daniel sat in his tent, cleaning his rifle more out of habit than need. His mind kept drifting to Kira's words. By the time the second moon rose above the camp, he stood and headed toward her tent. The guards outside barely glanced at him as he stepped inside. Kira was there, sitting on the edge of a small cot. Her armor was off, replaced by a simple dark shirt and loose trousers. For the first time, Daniel saw her without the silver plates that always made her seem untouchable. She looked smaller, but not weaker, just more real. "Sit," she said. Gesturing to the space beside her, he did. The cot dipping slightly under their combined weight. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kira said quietly, "When I first met you, I thought you wouldn't last a week." Daniel smiled faintly. "You tried to make sure of that." She gave a short laugh. "Maybe I did." Her gaze softened. "But you didn't break. You didn't run. And you didn't let me fight alone." Daniel met her eyes, seeing none of the mockery that used to hide behind them. "What are you saying, Kira?" he asked, his voice low. She leaned back slightly, her hands resting on her knees. "I've fought beside many warriors, human and Viren. Most are gone now, but you." You're different. When we fight, it feels like we're part of the same. Blade, Daniel let the words settle between them. He thought about the battles they had faced, the canyon, the beast, the ambush, and the countless times they had moved in sync without a single word. It was more than just fighting, it was trust, you. No, Daniel said slowly. I used to think you were just trying to prove you were better than me. Kira tilted her head, and now? Now I think you were trying to see if I was worth standing beside. Her lips curved into a real smile. Small but warm. Maybe I was, she said. Almost like a confession, the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled. With all the things they didn't need to say, outside, the wind rustled the tent fabric, carrying the distant sounds of the camp inside. The space between them seemed to shrink with every breath. Kira's hand brushed against his, not by accident. You saved my life more than once, she said, her voice softer now. And you saved mine. Daniel replied. They sat like that. For a while, close but not touching any more than they already were. It was enough. They both knew something had changed, not just in the canyon, but in them. Finally, Kira stood, stepping closer. She said. But there was a warmth in her tone that hadn't been there before. Daniel rose too, and for a brief moment, they stood almost face to face. Her eyes held his steadily. No challenge, no mockery. No mockery, only the quiet certainty of someone who had chosen. We're not just allies anymore, she said. Almost in a whisper. Daniel nodded. No, we're not. He left the tent with the faint sound of her breathing still in his ears. As he walked back to his own, he knew that whatever battles came next, they would face them side by side. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And somewhere, deep down, he understood the truth. The tiny alien warrior who had once mocked his size had found in him something she didn't expect. And he had found in her the one person he could trust without question. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was something far more dangerous and far more precious.